Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call this regular Board of Education meeting to order, please. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ms. Emmons, would you please lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Suzanne, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Ustruck?
Here.
Mr. Keller?
Here.
Ms. Curran?
Here.
Ms. Emmons?
Here.
Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Bailey?
Here.
Ms. Sujecki? Here. Mrs. Justum? Here. And President Sickett.
Present. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Board members and Dr. Lexman, any additions or modification to this evening's agenda?
I have two requests to modify the agenda. One is under consent agenda. I ask that we separate 9.2, the employment summary, and the board vote on it separately. There are two supplementary contracts that are relatives of sitting board members, so we just need to take action separately, and those two board members wouldn't participate in that.
Sure.
And then if we could move 10.1, maybe before the superintendent's report, and that's really from Mary Pat Michaels. She's here for that particular item, but she has a rehearsal at Concordia University at 7, and we want her to drive safely there. So if we could do that, I'd appreciate it.
That's fine.
Any problems with those two changes? No. Very good. Board members, anything? Changes? No? Okay, we will move on to the public comments. Right now, there is one. Just a reminder, please try to hold your comments to 3 minutes, and we do not answer questions or debate topics here, but if it is a specific question that's being asked of the board, we will respond either in writing before the next meeting or at the next regularly scheduled meeting. Douglas Freiberg? Thank you. Oh, and if you please state your name and address for the...
Hi, everyone. My name is Douglas Freiberg.
Hi, Doug.
448 West Lapham Street. I'm pretty familiar with most of you guys. Longtime PTA guy and longtime school district student. So first off, thank you guys for tackling the budget in a fairly reasonable way. That's for the admin and the board guys. Thank you. I was very pleasantly surprised just from the lack of damage. I mean, it was quite pleasant to walk into the school year and have all of the services and everything that we've come to enjoy in our school present. So good job, thank you for that. Number two, I'm surprised I'm the only person talking as well, but continue to focus on the student experience while we're talking about budgets, right? Everyone's worried about their tax levy. I moved to the district 11 years ago now, knowing full well the taxes in Milwaukee County and the city of West Allis. But again, that's held stable all these years, and so continue focusing on those students regardless of the comments that you may or may not hear on the public forums and in the presence here. So just continue focusing there. And my last comment is one close to my heart because it's going to negatively affect me next year, and that's community schools and the lack of transfers. My 10-year-old will be moving on to Lane this year, which is awesome. She's really excited. A lot of good teachers over there. She's really excited. However, my son is young. He's only 3. He's going to be forced into a different school. We've started warming him up to that. It hasn't gone well. He's been at Wilson a couple weekends for rec department stuff. And we're trying to get him warmed up to Wilson. He said, no, this isn't my school. My school is Mrs. Gosh and Mrs. Lieben and all the teachers and Mr. Thompson in the LMC and all that at Irving that I see, that he sees weekly, if not every couple days. He's really excited to follow his sister, and I hope you guys really think about wisely changing those rules, not necessarily an open issue like we had in the past with the difference in enrollment, but the district is losing students. We need to focus on some positive things, and right now that one's a pretty negative one in my family, and that's about it on that. So thanks for listening to me, guys. Appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Freeberg was the only one that had signed up to address the board, but I will ask at this time if there's anybody in the audience that would like to approach and speak to the board or make comments. You can do so at this time. Seeing none, we will now jump to 10.1 of our action items, a field trip to Atlanta, Georgia. And Mary Pat's on her way.
So you've seen the application for this one, similar to the one that we approved for Central. The Nathan Hale Group would now like to do a similar trip to Atlanta, Georgia, for the band, orchestra, and choir. So you've seen all the requirements and all the instructions that they gave with them, so let us know if you have any questions. Dan?
Thanks. The coupon books that were going out and being sold, does that have anything to do with this particular field trip?
Are they being sold by music students, or
At Hale, Nathan Hale?
are they being sold by music students?
Yes, I believe so.
Then anything that they do as fundraisers, a portion will go towards their trips.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Noah?
I just have some broad questions.
Okay.
So we hear like unique opportunities to do things. Like, what do you have to do to qualify to be able to go and perform at these locations? Like, is there like an application process? Like, how does it work?
I think that the music department works with their tour agency people that they work with, and also have contacts at some of the places. I know they have contacts at the University of Atlanta. So they have those contacts that they can work with, and these universities offer music clinics and those kind of things. So they're going to do a master class with other bands, orchestras, and choruses. There's a clinic involved, and you apply. They may have to send tapes sometimes, or I guess they would send CDs now, not tapes. But a lot of it is, if you plan a trip, then they work to make sure that they have those educational opportunities as well as performances. And they attend performances as well. They're attending 3 major events when they're there as well.
And then when it comes to the different types of trips that you have, is there like a wide range of options that you come from? How do you narrow down to where that you decide to go?
They did not share with me how they came up with this one.
Oh.
A lot of them from the music department come from places where they have contacts and connections and can get students into clinics and things like that. So
Or maybe-
sometimes it comes from there, or historical trips that other groups have taken, or they'll talk to other band and choir directors in the area who will say, oh, we did this trip, years ago, and it was very successful for our students.
And some of them may have done the same similar trip as students themselves. You know.
That's all the questions I had.
Yeah.
Sue?
Is this the same week? Are the Hale and Central going down for the same clinic at the same?
No, Central's
No.
going to New Orleans,
New Orleans.
and Hale's going to Atlanta.
Oh,
And I
that's
believe
close.
they're about a week apart.
But I should have known
They're
that.
both in March, but they're about a week apart.
Anyone else? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Any final discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Pat.
Thank you very much.
Now we'll jump back up, number 7, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Lexman.
Great, thank you. This evening, we're going to start at 7.1, the report from West Iowa Central High School. Our student representatives are here, so update us on what's going on at Central.
So I'm Madison Gordon again. I'm also a senior. And I'm Jose, and I'm also a senior. So on Friday, October 13th, Mr. Mente took over 50 engineering students to Rockwell Automotives in Mequon. They listened to representatives from UWM, Rockwell, and MATC about careers available in Rockwell.
On Monday, October 16th, Achieve 3000 representatives were at Central for the entire day to collect user feedback from both students and educators. The reps were impressed with both our staff and students, as well as the responses and feedback they received.
On Tuesday, October 17th, 77 students went to the Hispanic College Fair at Cardinal Stritch. There they were able to meet over 55 colleges in both Wisconsin and all throughout the United States. The college representatives provided students with information about administration requirements, application processes, costs, scholarship opportunities, and dates that they can visit their campuses.
Coach Milojnik, Victor E., Deontay Vanslow, Noah Sam Lovejoy, David Duggins, Lamonte Blakely, and Jacob Fierce took a walk over to Franklin Elementary to talk about Central and sportsmanship. Carroll University football players were also in attendance. Our students did a great job representing our school and being role models for future Bulldogs.
The PBIS leadership team started a new incentive program. We hand out sweet recognitions to students and staff. who are being recognized for being responsible, engagement, and learning, and also positive leaders in the building. These individuals were nominated by staff members at Central.
The WAC News team, whose members include 1 freshman, 5 seniors, and myself, came together every morning at 7:20 to produce the video announcements. These are shown homeroom every day and can be found on Central's website, as well as the WAC Create Space YouTube channel.
And then final thing for overall just important stuff, Central has their new little free library outside of the auditorium. The Woods Room, Interact, and Art Club made it.
The boys and girls cross-country team finished up their season on a high note. Yesterday, many of our JV runners had their best times at the South Milwaukee sectional invite and saw huge growth throughout the season. Tomorrow, our varsity boys and girls team will be competing at Grand Park with the hopes of bringing their own personal records.
And then this last Friday, our varsity team ended their season with a win over Cudahy. And then JS Online also recognized junior Glenn Martin for his outstanding performance at the last football game.
Okay. And then just to talk about something that's coming up is the James and the Giant Peach musical, which will be held on November 10th, 11th, 17th, and 18th.
That's all we have.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions for the students? Any comments? Dan?
I just have a comment. Every time I see students, be it juniors or freshmen, sophomores, and seniors come to us from both schools, I'm happy. But the enthusiasm that you two are showing tonight is fantastic, and I'm seeing more and more of that from your school, and it seems like you're getting more and more of your teachers and your fellow students to become happier about what you have to offer. And if you're an example of what's going on over there, you're doing a fantastic
Thank
job.
you.
So is your administration, and so are the students and the staff. So kudos.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, you are free to leave. You do not need to stick around for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, guys.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening. Thank you for the encouragement. Thank you.
And so we'll go on to 7.2. This is the board showcase. This is not a school. This is the first time we'll have, one of the departments, and today we're going to focus on mathematics in 612. So our math team can come on up and they have a short presentation and some feedback from teachers about some of the new math resources.
So you can either send it that way, or you can send it to the Apple TV.
Okay.
Either way. Jane, do you want to? Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I am Jane Carr. I am the math lead for
Jane,
elementary.
you're going to have to talk into the mic.
I don't seem to be working right. The sound was very muffled over in the corner too.
Oh, it was?
Students
Okay.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm representing elementary tonight, and a few highlights, a few things that we've really been working on that we're pretty proud of. So our goal, I was going back to the strategic plan, of course, which really drives us, is to create a guaranteed and viable curriculum for all elementary West Allis, West Milwaukee math students. That's what we wanted to achieve. So some of the things that we've been doing, we adopted the My Math resource, and we've had that now for, this is our second year. We created a district document called the Curriculum and Assessment Alignment. And that aligns the Common Core state standards, which is really what we need to be teaching, and the My Math. Because My Math is a resource, so you want to make sure that they align. And so we, as a committee, got together and said, oh, well, let's make sure that everything that's in My Math is what we should be teaching according to the Common Core, and vice versa. So we aligned them and created a document for teachers. And then we did I can statements within those, like, that broke up all the standards and said, all right, so what does that really look like and sound like to kids? Like, so that they know and they're part of the knowing the what. So then we said, okay, so now we have this guaranteed and viable curriculum, and we know that all the kids across the district are going to receive similar opportunities and experiences in math. So how will we judge that? How will we know that it's working? And so then we created some common assessments. And so we took a look at the MyMath, and we took a look at the Common Core and that document, and we created some common assessments that, so for example, every third grader across the district will take that math exam, that common assessment. So now we have something in common to talk about. So it has everything on there that we feel is rigorous and relevant to third graders that they should know by the time they leave third grade. And that's important. So think about that now. So now we've got this resource, we've got the what to teach, we've got the I can statements, we've got those common assessments. And teachers are feeling like, oh my gosh, this is all making sense now. Now we've really, we feel cohesive. And no matter what school you go to, you're going to get similar experiences. So then we've got these common assessments, and we've got all of these things going on, right? So this is the thing that I'm really excited about, because I've been in the district for many, many years. And one of the things that I always thought was important was the communication or lack of communication there's 11 elementary schools. And so how are we at communicating what everybody is supposed to be using or doing, or this guaranteed and viable curriculum? So what we did is we created a math council. And we asked 1 to 2 representatives from all 11 elementaries to be part of it, teachers. And we get together 6 times a year, and we talk about math, and we talk about what are we noticing? Like, for example, if we're all looking at those common assessments. So this council was formed, and it creates teacher leaders, it empowers teachers, it gives them the voice. They're the ones that are in the trenches. And so creating this was really an important way to make sure that we're on the same page, and so on and so forth. So our first task, and I think I gave it to you, I sent out a survey to the teachers, and I got 75 responses, and I just asked simply 3 questions. I asked, do you use the MyMath resource? Do you feel the MyMath resource has improved or enhanced your math instruction? And then I asked, my overall response to the MyMath resource is, are you unsatisfied, somewhat satisfied, satisfied, or extremely satisfied? And so you can take a look at this data from these 75 teachers that responded, and get a nice snapshot picture of how the teachers are feeling. But here's the piece that is really what I'm looking forward to. Now we have this math council, and we had 40 teachers. Take a look at this. We had 40 teachers respond and give us information.
That's awesome.
Right, about how they're feeling about math in our district, about MyMath, about math in general. And so the council can get together now, and we can really analyze that data and look at it and say, what are we learning from these teachers? What do they need? What misconceptions do they have? And so that is exciting work. And so I feel like we're really headed in a really good direction. And I would love to report back on how the Math Council, how it's working. And I know we're going to be doing this with all of the subject areas. And so I know I also only have about 3 minutes, and I think I usually go over. So I'll pass on. But that's elementary, and those are some of the really good things that we've been doing.
So before we jump into 612, we'll also add to that we have those councils going for all the different subject areas for the core areas. So there's one for social studies, science, and then English and Language Arts. And we've asked each building to make sure that, especially the smaller buildings, that, they may only send one rep because they don't have enough to send two to all of the different meetings. But we've asked the principals to make sure that there's representation at each meeting so we can continue to get that feedback from teachers as we roll out those ICANN statements and what would be our guaranteed and viable curriculum. We've shared it with committee already, the K-12 ICANN statements, and how we'd like to publish those for the year as draft form and let these councils kind of live and breathe with them and then give us feedback and get feedback from the community and the parents as well. You'll see those on November 20th when we have a board workshop around that, so that you'll get a chance to see what those K-12 ICANN statements. So that's that expected outcomes at each grade level in the core subject areas that we want to be sure that are guaranteed and viable across the district at each school, no matter where the student goes. So you'll see those on the 20th, but that's part of what Jane's referring to is some of the work we asked K-5 math to do, and 6-12 math has similar ones as well. Did you have a question, Noah?
Just a quick question. You said 75 responses. How many total teachers were there? So what percentage response rate we're looking at for the survey?
Not sure.
We have about 300,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but with surveys, I thought 75 was a pretty good
That's a
turnout.
pretty good response, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll pass it on to 6-12 math, which is led by Donna Kresovich and Matt Lesser.
Hello. So Matt and I have had the curriculum coordinator contract for all of last year, and we've continued with that. So we brought some teachers with us. We'd like to share with you some of the initiatives and programs that we've started last year and that we've taken to a higher level, and we've got some programs at both high schools that are going. We have Amanda Troyer, who is a new teacher at Central, who's going to be sharing some information. We have Sean Ann Pierner from Franklin Wright, and then Matt and myself. Dan was going to join us tonight, but he got called away on personal business. We're going to share with you updates on how we're improving access and equity, what we've done to ensure guaranteed and viable curriculum from 6th all the way through 12th grade, some initiatives we've started with personalized learning, a new program, teacher learning communities, and how we're using our monthly meetings to help teachers improve, and then some initiatives at the high schools that we're doing for intervention and remediation. So Matt is going to talk about access and equity.
All right. Yeah, one of the focus points for the 6-12 math curricular area was just, in general, improving math achievement. And so a couple things that we saw early on when we were looking at the data and things like that are those first, the first bullet for sure, improved access to high school courses by removal of below grade level courses. For a while, we got into kind of this mode, and a lot of other districts were in similar modes where students needed 3 credits to graduate. And instead of thinking about what bar we want students to reach, it was more a little bit about getting 3 credits. And so we had these, and you know, we had Algebra A and Algebra B, so we took an algebra course, split it into 2. We had Intro to Math Apps, which was prior to that, okay? So it's even kind of a more intro level math course. So they get done with 3 credits of math and only get through algebra itself. So we reflected on that and worked as a team from the district level along with the teaching staff and said, we have to do something here to get students all to access a certain point, okay, when they exit high school. So we really talked about algebra, geometry, and algebra 2 being the core 3 courses. And instead of bringing it down and having remedial courses, we thought everyone should start in algebra this year, and we'll add on the supports they need to get the access to the curriculum we want them to access. All right, so that was that first bullet. So we've revamped some things, and I think there's going to be some discussion about that from Donna here. And then the equitable teaching practices. We were recently at a conference in the Dells, and you can see there that we tried to grab staff members from the different buildings, and so we could get the communication out to people and work as a team. And part of that was on access, part of it was on equity, and then that formative assessment piece where learning new techniques to assess students in their instruction so that you can give the kids supports they need to be successful in the access point like algebra where we want them to come in at. There was a picture of equity in one of the sessions I went to because I was able to go to this conference as well. And it's kind of what's the difference between equal and equity? You know, and they had a fence there, and they had 3 people standing, and one was real tall, one was real short, and a middle height person, and they all gave them one box to stand on, and they said, that's equal. Well, the short person still couldn't see over the fence. Okay, so they said, well, what about equity? So then they gave the shortest person 2 boxes to stand on, and the tallest one none, and the middle one, and they could all see over the fence. And they're like, that's equity. Everybody can see over the fence, see where they got to get to. You have the supports in place to get you there. And then they actually went one step further, called liberation, and they actually had the next photo with the 3 standing there looking at the baseball field it was, because they were trying to watch a game over the fence. And the fence was not even there. So they're like, you're able to see it from all different levels whenever you needed to, and that was liberation. So it's like, how do you go from equality to equity to liberation in your teaching, and give students access to the curriculum and the supports they need. So that was a neat analogy to kind of bring back. But you can see there that we had a team go, and it was real helpful to have different buildings with different representation, so we can kind of disperse and have, build that leadership that we're looking for district-wide in each building. So, okay.
There we go. Okay, and so one of the big things that we did, like Matt said, we found that we had a lower track that kids could spend 3 years in and get nowhere near grade level math, particularly math that wouldn't prepare them at all for the ACT that all of our juniors had to take. So last year, we proposed making some changes to the courses. Number 1 was that all incoming ninth graders, take nothing lower than an Algebra 1 course. This was new to us because sometimes we had students coming in 2 levels below that. So that meant a big change. It meant that we really had to look at this course that we had, so we've got some teachers that are going to talk about things that we're doing at the high schools. We, at Deirdre's suggestion, used that Intro to Apps class that used to serve as like a pre-algebra class, and now students who really need that support, that class now runs concurrently with Algebra, and so we have a group of students who, if they need that support, would have been in Intro to Apps only, which was in some cases 2 years below a 9th grade course, now take the 9th grade course. They can take the Intro to Apps concurrently, and then what we do is preload some of the curriculum we do, and Amanda's going to speak to some of the things that she does in her class to help give those kids access to grade level material. And we do a lot of times on the fly support. We look at diagnostics and whatever it is that students need, and that's something we do at both high schools. So Algebra 1 is taken by all 9th grade students, Geometry is taken by all 10th grade students, and then Algebra 2 now is a course where students will get that 3rd credit of math, where prior they may have gotten that 3rd credit of math as an algebra course or maybe even a geometry. We did talk about putting the technical math class on hold because we didn't feel that it was meeting its purpose. We'll be talking in the future about how best to reapproach that when it's time, but for now, all of our juniors are in an Algebra 2 class. Over the summer, we spent a lot of time, we had a lot of teachers from all grade levels and both high schools and some of our middle schools get together, and we aligned our curriculum with each other to make sure that if we're teaching algebra at Central, we're teaching the same algebra at Hale. If we're teaching that algebra at Central and Hale and at one of the middle schools, that they're teaching what we're teaching, and that we are hitting a lot of the learning targets that we need to hit. So that's been cataloged. That was a huge effort on our part, because we found in some cases we had 5 different geometry curriculums, all from the same book at just our 2 high schools. So we've cleaned that up, we've cataloged it in shared places where all teachers can access it, and we do refer to it often. We do have a resource renewal project coming up for next year that we'll talk about a little bit at the end. So the focus on guaranteed and viable curriculum, like you said, making sure everyone's on the same page has been most of our focus. Dan Volkaluski is going to be here. He is a teacher at Central. He is one of their 2 new department chairs. He was going to talk about how Math Lab is working. He was not able to come, but he did write a statement for us that Amanda is going to read.
So he emailed this to me. You all hear me? Just making sure.
Yes.
Okay. So the Math Lab at West Allis Central High School, and also Hale, from what I gather, is a great resource for our students. It's a place in the building that is staffed with a math teacher every hour. Classroom teachers have placed tests and quizzes in folders for the math lab teacher to hand out to students to take when they have been absent on the day of the test or the quiz. This is helping the department eliminate the "I can't stay after or before school because blank" excuse. The Math Lab also provides a place for students to receive one-on-one instruction to help them get caught up with when they miss school. We have received a positive response from both staff members and the students. Now, here's some data that we have collected, and we collected this via a Google form that we do. So when someone comes to the Math Lab, we fill out a Google form, who you are, why you're here, who's your teacher, what's your class. We have specified what the students are coming to the Math Lab for into 5 categories. There's quiz, test, makeup, help during study hall, help during math class, working on review assignments, and other. Out of the 294 students that have come into the Math Lab, 4 have come in to work on other items with a teacher that's in the lab. 14 students have come into the lab for extra help during their math class. 31 kids have come to the Math Lab for help from a math teacher during their study hall. 8 students have used the Math Lab to work on review assignments, and 237 students have used the Math Lab as a place to make up a test or a quiz.
So one of the biggest goals of Math Lab is failure prevention and to support credit attainment. At this time, it's too early for us to have any data on that, but we're working with the deans of both buildings to collect data on where our students are right now and how successful we are. Our goal is to reduce failures. Do I answer questions? Okay, sorry.
When my son wanted to get into, they had Math Lab way back when dinosaurs were around. But when he went up to the Math Lab, they had a quota. And if there were 30 kids in the room, he couldn't go in. Now, that was presented a real problem for students who really needed some math help. How do you address this problem?
We have not really had that problem, at least at Central, because we do it during class periods. So usually math teachers will email each other saying, hey, I've got so many kids that need to make up a quiz, or so many kids that need help. So typically on a regular day, I'd see anywhere from 5 to 10 kids. So we haven't had overwhelming numbers at the same time, and it is spread out throughout the day. So we have someone in there almost every hour during the school day.
And we reduced the number of sections that math teachers were required to teach. Last year they taught 6 cores, and we went down to 5 to make time during the day for an actual teacher to be manning the math lab. That's exactly how it works at the university level, that if you need help with math instruction, you can go and access a professor during office hours. So we modeled it after what that looks like. So we haven't had an issue at either building, and Donna can talk to their numbers about there being overcrowding. If that was an issue, we'd free up more teachers to make it the resource available to the kids who need it.
I was going to say real quick, what's kind of neat at Hale-wise is, if you've been in Hale upstairs, I guess it used to be the cafeteria, it's the pie room, where all those walls move around. And so actually we have 3 supports there. We have the Learning Center that's drop-in for non-math related pieces, and there's some credit recovery pieces on the computer going on there with a teacher there. There's a math lab with a teacher, and then we have an academic study hall. In the 3 rooms that attach, what we did is we moved all the walls out of the way and basically just put like portable chalkboards, so they are flexible spaces where you could move like overflow into different areas to help support. So that hasn't been an issue at Hale either.
So far, we haven't seen excess capacity. Our plan, if we do, we also have the regular study hall, and most of our hours, at least half of them, are also covered with a math teacher, so we have overflow in the regular study hall area. So far, we haven't seen that excess capacity, but that would be wonderful if we did, because then they're utilizing our resource. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a few questions. From a standpoint, and we all know that technology can break down anytime, anywhere. So when you're in, or you're in the middle of presenting this to your students and using technology, and it breaks down, what type of recovery do we have set up for you? I mean, does it take instantaneous recovery, a day or 2 days? Do you have the resources that'll cover that for you as well as the students?
Well, we don't really depend on technology for the math lab? Are you asking specifically for the math lab?
Well, if you're showing a program, you know, that it's stated in some of these that there are programs on here that you're using, and then all of a sudden the technology that you're using breaks down, it seems like there's a little bit of a lull, like 2 or 3 days before you can get that back up and running.
Like Alex, right. So, yeah, we haven't had that in some of the math programs that we use. A lot of what we use at the high schools in particular and the middle schools are Alex programs, and
Right.
so those are technology driven. We haven't had any delays in the use of Alex because those are individual subscriptions. When we have any kind of delay with, the beginning of the year, we experienced a little bit of delay with the conversion between Skyward and McGraw-Hill, but the teachers have then the resources that come with the instruction, you know, so they have physical workbooks. We bought those for the middle school students, so they still have all of those. At the high school, Alex is really more of an intervention than it is part of the core program, so you can just simply pick that up later if for some reason the technology wasn't working.
Okay, the other thing, I just look at it, and we have 6 grandchildren that a few of them are in the elementary level, and a few of them are over at Frank Lloyd Wright. They're all good in math. However, what is making us happy is they're getting better at math. And when I see that, and I see them coming home and talking about, I can do this, and I want to show you how, I get excited as a grandparent. So I have to congratulate you in regards to what you've put together and how you're working and communicating as a team, because that's really important, because the kids see it, and I think, and I hope, that the parents are starting to see it, because that makes it a little easier to put in new programs for you. Thank you.
We've had a ton of collaboration. Donna and Matt are really good at that. Last year, with their first year being the 612 leads for math, it was a little tougher for them to, you know, they worked on a lot of what they were doing at Hale and then stretched over to Central. And now this year, they've really made the focus working all the way through from middle school up. In the spring, we'll work at looking at K-5 and 612 to make sure that those are feeding all the way through. That's kind of the purpose of those I can statements, is that we end up not seeing a gap in our math instruction, kindergarten through 12th grade.
That's fantastic, and I do like the fact that you brought up that you're using university-type programs for the older students in high schools, because that is the future. There's no doubt about it. So, thank you again.
Thank you. Another initiative that we proposed to Deirdre this summer, and she's giving us the opportunity with the Math 612 to pilot, is teacher learning communities. We have brought Shawn-Ann Pierner on board to be a teacher leader in this area, and I'm going to let Shawn-Ann describe to you what it is we're doing with our monthly meetings.
So in conjunction with our usual CAT meetings that we were having every month with the grade levels, so we're meeting as a 612 group, and it is teacher-led rather than being administrative-led. This is giving teachers an opportunity to voice their successes and also their struggles so that we can work through it as an entire department. We talk about the things that are going really well in the classroom, things people are trying, while also providing some resources to teachers who are looking for something new to try, another way to reach their student. We have a lot of peer-to-peer connections. So as teachers are sharing, people are taking notes, getting to know what else is out there, what their resources are, who's got them, how they're utilizing them. This was incredibly important as we went to the DELS conference and talking about equity, what that looks like in our classroom, and bringing some of those things back in to share with our fellow teachers for what will work best for our students at this point and also moving forward. We have looked at the instructional initiatives in the district and things that are discussed at the leadership teams as well, so that all of it is working in conjunction, and we feel like teachers are having a voice and being able to talk to others either at their grade level, but at least in their subject area. So it's very real to everybody all the time, and given, you know, a month to try something and make sure that it's working and share how that goes and what that looks like at all the different levels has been really instrumental in what we're doing at the 612.
Yeah, thank you. And like I explained, our Intro to Apps class used to be something that came a year or two before algebra class. Now we've repurposed the entire class and written new curriculum with a very intense focus on disciplinary literacy and computational fluency. Amanda's a teacher at Central, and she'd like to share with you how that's going.
So Intro to Apps as a new teacher has been really fun because I'm a first-year teacher. So I've gotten, Donna will give me guidance on what units to plan, and then I can kind of work within what I know about the students that I have in certain classes and the individual learning types to try and build a class that can get them up to having those algebra skills. And I try a lot of different hands-on activities, a lot of different, not the traditional where I stand up and lecture, but we're working together, we're collaborating, we're being active in the classroom, we're problem solving instead of just doing equations. And I do, as an Intro to Apps teacher, also teach 2 sections of algebra. So I guess what I see the most working is I have a few students that I see twice a day. They come to me for Intro to Apps, and then they come to me for algebra. And I have one student in particular who came in, and she was very, very just lacking confidence in math. And I can't do this, and she came into my math class going, I don't think I can. And working on confidence building, especially in the Intro to Apps, because we do have a lot of students that are either struggling or are in a math intervention because they're special ed, they get special ed services. So I work with a co-teacher, and we just try to build up that mathematical confidence. So Intro to Apps is less about trying to really pound in like all those algebra concepts, but to just build that confidence in math and get some of those problem-solving skills that will help them in algebra. And this particular student, she took her Chapter 1 test a few weeks ago and got a B+. And she came to me nearly in tears because she was so happy that she got a B+ on this test. She's like, can you please call my mom and tell her that I got a B+? So I did. I called up her mom and said, she's doing great. So, I mean, it's good to see that kind of confidence building and that it is helping some of our students.
And one of the big topics at the conference that we just came from was eliminating that lower track and how districts are struggling with how to even do that. So we found that we're a little bit ahead of others in getting rid of that, just abandoning it completely and then providing the support. So thank you, Amanda. Any questions for us in the? You lost it. All right. So that's really. Where'd the other one go?
Just tell them what our next steps are.
And then, so the next steps for us, we have one more slide that we tacked on here. Our biggest initiative this year is resource renewal for next year. So we are slated to get new materials, and at this time we are looking at different companies. We have Kendall Hunt to look at, CPM, College Prep Math. We are looking at, what's the one that's in our, the name? The McGraw-Hill that we have in the intermediate schools. And right now, Adam is still working on getting us all the materials from the different companies, and then we'll be sending those around to the high schools. So that's a big effort for us this year.
A few questions. First of all, thank you very much for removing the lower level tiered math classes that we previously offered. They definitely did not leave our students college and career ready, and I think it was definitely a disservice to them in focusing more on getting credits and less on actually preparing people for life. So thank you. I'm glad that we're being a leader in that, and hopefully other districts will follow our lead. I'm married to a math teacher, so this subject is not near and dear to my heart per se, but I hear about it a lot. It's good to see that we're moving forward and putting ourselves out there in front. As far as what a lot of new things going on in the math department, what challenges are you guys seeing as far as implementation or struggles resource-wise, anything like that we should know about?
Probably the biggest one is the one that you just commended us for. That's a huge mind shift in a lot of teachers' minds. We learned a lot at this latest conference about it's scary for a teacher to really push kids and set the bar high, because you don't want to see them fail, because we've seen what happens to students when they fail at math. They come to us a lot of times with a lot of emotional baggage that we have to sort through just to get their minds on what we need them to do that day. So it has not been easy for our teachers to accept that we eliminated those lower tracks, because it was a safe place for a lot of us, but getting our teachers to realize that we were really shortchanging students. So there is a mind shift that's going to have to continue to go on, and we're hoping that through the teacher learning communities that we can support our teachers in that respect too, because they don't want to see their kids fail. Pushing them is hard, but we're going to work together and try to support each other to make it happen. We've gotten a lot of support from Deirdre and from Adam with the initiatives. When we knew that we needed to eliminate the tracks, we knew we just couldn't say these are the new classes, that we needed supports for teachers, which we've gotten in the teacher learning communities. We needed supports for students, which we've done by repurposing Intro to Apps and our math lab. So we appreciate what we've been able to do in a very short amount of time. Now it's just making sure our teachers have what they need. I believe everything is in place, and now it's just making sure, hearing from our teachers and understanding, kind of monitoring what's going on, how things are shaking out, and then making adjustments as we go along.
Well, thank you very much for your hard work on that front. I mean, it's definitely a worthy cause, and I think it's going to, in the long term, serve our students much better moving forward, so thank you.
And I think that guaranteed curriculum piece, those discussions, when you have 12 people in a math department in each building, I mean, you can imagine the different thoughts about different things. So it's good to get together, especially with these teacher learning communities, talk about what everyone's doing, be on the same page, and it started with the curriculum work in the summer. So,
Dan?
Thank you. How do you deal with the person that's really advanced in this program? Where do you go with them?
We are taking another look at acceleration efforts. With the new math program at the middle school, we've been very careful because it is truly Common Core aligned. There's a lot of material that's delivered in 7th and 8th grade that is currently being delivered in our 9th grade algebra course. Our 9th grade algebra course is outdated, which is why it's up for renewal next year. So we need to look at who those students are. We already have some of those students. We've been tracking them very closely. And the last time that I was here to talk to you about the 2 classes that we added last year, the Honors Algebra 1, that is a combined algebra and geometry. So we put those in place for students that are accelerated. And then we have next year starting a new geometry algebra 2 that will help them accelerate for students like you identified.
Thank you. So you're ahead of the game. Awesome.
Seth?
So Amanda mentioned earlier about, getting the student that you had who was fearful of math. And we hear about this all the time, especially for girls. And so Jane and Sean-Ann, like at the elementary and the middle school level, what are we doing to try to combat that at an early age, that girls don't have to be afraid of math? They don't, and they shouldn't be.
I'm just like,
That's a huge problem.
yeah.
One of the things we've seen when we look at accelerated students that are at the high school right now, the juniors and seniors who are in our AP Calculus classes, one of the statistics that we've been very proud of is that the participation from girls in the highest level math courses is on par with what we see on the national average. We've been very careful to take a look at the new math that we have at the middle school and making sure that we maintain that. We don't have any statistics to share because we haven't been looking to accelerate, because we know that that material at the middle school is much higher than it's been in the past. We need to be very careful going forward to make sure that we haven't lost any demographic groups. And that is one of the things that Adam and Deirdre and I and Matt are looking at right now to see how do we accelerate, because there was already a lot of acceleration built in just by getting new materials. So we're hoping by getting new materials at the high school next year that, we are on the lookout for problems. We aren't seeing any at this point, but it is something that we're going to continue to look at. But having new materials at the high school that align with the middle schools should continue.
Heather?
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Jane wanted
I'm
to-
sorry. How are you doing?
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We really embrace the growth mindset model at starting in 4K. that, and we call our students mathematicians. When we are teaching math or doing anything with numbers, all right, mathematicians, what do you think we should do with this problem? So we are constantly setting them up for success in thinking about math as mistakes are okay to make, mistakes move us forward, all of those things that the growth mindset, which when we went to school, we didn't have. You know, you were kind of a math person or not a math person. And we've done a complete mind shift on that as adults in the buildings. And I think that's going to make a huge difference.
Can I share just for a second? I just had a question about the number of math classes in the high schools right now. And I know we have a huge range and variety. Do you know about how many different levels of math we're currently teaching at the secondary levels?
We teach 9th grade algebra, 10th grade geometry, 11th grade algebra 2. Students who make it through that have the options to take a pre-calculus course. From pre-calculus, we also have a function, stats, and trig course. If someone's not up to taking an honors course but needs that 4th level of college prep math, if there's someone who's been accelerated and they finish those courses prior to 11th grade, then they can take calculus AB, and we have calculus BC for those who reach it. We also have the stats course. That's down from many classes. We had at least 4 classes that have been eliminated in the last 2 years. The intro to apps has been repurposed. We eliminated the algebra A and the algebra B. We put tech math on the shelf, so we have fewer classes, but we do have an honors version of all of the classes that are available now because we put that new one in last year and we have a new one in for next year.
Thank you.
Dan, did you have your hand up?
I did. I just, and I was trying to look and Google it, but I just, during my off time, I had the opportunity to watch a movie about John Glenn, the astronaut, and his crew. And he almost lost his the flight. And if it weren't for a lady mathematician, they would not have been able to bring that crew back, John Glenn's crew back. And she just retired from the program. She was instrumental in the Apollo program and the Space Shuttle program, and she just retired at 95 years old.
Hidden figures. The movie's Hidden Figures.
So
Sean Ann did want to add something to the conversation around building more of our females, especially into the math from the middle school perspective.
Sure. So in the middle school, some of us have done a lot of research and read a lot of research about how male students learn compared to how female students learn. And we know that female students learn by making connections. And so a lot of what we've been doing in our classroom is looking at the real world connections for our students, things that make sense to them, and then bringing them into the new learning, which I think is grabbing a lot of our learners these days. Some kids that might have checked out because it was just rote memory or they just had to memorize a particular formula are now figuring out how this is used in the real world. And I know in my class I'm always looking for how does that relate to certain occupations out there that are, female related and male related, and bringing those both in so that students get an idea of, you always hear the question, where am I going to use this? And so making that really real for our students. Our new series does a pretty decent job of it, but we take it even further in our classrooms to really try to grab a hold of everyone that's in there, but especially our female learners who may have gotten lost before, and really trying to relate it to something that means something to them now.
I'd say equity and access piece really is a focus. You hear that continually being talked about. In our classrooms, we're really reflecting a lot about, in those math classes throughout, is it a picture of our school and our district in every single classroom, with all the demographics. And it's something we have to continue to look at, if it's 50-50, male, is it 50-50 all the way through to, BC calculus and things like that, or any race, ethnic group, socioeconomic status, whatever. So looking at all those things, and it should be a mirror of your student population.
Noah, had your hand up?
Just a quick question. You mentioned about
bringing it back to occupations. Do you have people come in who are in certain occupations to talk to students, probably at the high school level more, but to comment about, oh, this is how I use algebra, this is how I use calculus in my job? Because there's a lot of jobs, as you know, that people don't realize you use math for, and you might not realize you're using that math for and that understanding that you got in high school, and then maybe later in college.
At the high schools, both high, the Central? Yeah, both high schools have the career fair, and part of our ACP planning is exploring careers in math. If a student is interested in math, or even if they're not interested in math, but they're exploring a particular career, learning what subjects, and that's part of that whole career cruising that we have. Students investigate a particular career, and then they look at the educational requirements for it, so they know upfront what it is they're going to need for whatever it is they're interested in.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments by board members? Sue?
I just wanted to applaud you. I'm really excited about what I'm listening and what I'm hearing, and listening, hearing. But, you know, when people talk to one another, and that's what seems to be the greatest thing right now, is that you're all talking to one another. In the past, it seemed we were a little siloed, but we're not siloed anymore, and it's just a real compliment to all of you that all of this is really a benefit to our students. So I want to thank you.
Thank you. This is a wonderful district. So I got hired in this summer, fresh out of college. So one of the things I've really appreciated about this district, I know in Central and all, I've even gotten support from Hale. I get support from Donna. We email each other materials, but just from my the other teachers at Central, all the support that I've gotten, and they're constantly coming in and checking on me, making sure I have resources. We share resources. We meet. I talk to my coworkers daily about different things, so I feel very supported, which is making it a really, really easy transition into this teaching.
Awesome.
What college, if I could ask?
I went to Lakeland University. I started at Eastern Michigan and then transferred to Lakeland.
Could you do a promo for us? Thank you.
Well, I'd like to jump on what Sue said about not being siloed, but that's where I want to give kudos to Deidre and to Marty as administrative leaders. Teachers have always wanted to do that, but now they're able to do it. So thank you again.
Thank you.
That's good
Yep,
work.
thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, I think kudos. Well deserved.
Okay, we'll move to.
Awesome. Yep, so 7.3 legislative report, so it's a short piece. So Senate Bill 439, this bill requires the Department of Public Instruction to develop by the beginning of 18-19 school year a child sexual abuse prevention policy and instructional program to be provided to pupils in grades kindergarten through grade 6. So DPI would be required to include in the program an age-appropriate curriculum to provide pupils with the knowledge and tools to escape from a sexual abuse situation and communicate incidents of sexual abuse. Each school board would then be required to adopt and administer either DPI's program or its own policy or program beginning in the 18-19 school year. So we'll watch that. But I think, you know, given everything we know about what happens online, these are wise moves. So I think it'll be, hopefully get support, and then we'll move forward with planning. And then today, the State Department of Public Instruction just released the financial impact figures for the state voucher program. The impact continues to be greater over time. The program is now at 226 districts statewide, including West Allis, West Milwaukee. So the cost of the program is now $270 million annually, which is a $25 million increase from last year. And you did see even in what Andy presented in the workshop, some of the increase in voucher payments that, you know, will start impacting our property tax payers here. There's nothing new at the federal level. Going on to congratulatory resolutions. This is Christy Einberger at Nathan Hale. Christy finished in 5th place at Saturday's South Milwaukee Cross Country Sectional, which qualifies her for the WIAA State Cross Country Meet this Saturday in Wisconsin Rapids. So we're really proud of Christy. Then at 7.5, just a couple of quick updates. There were no public comments at our meeting on October 9th, so there's nothing to respond to there. We did have some really nice coverage in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel of the work we're doing around social emotional learning and in responding to the needs of mental health kids and our focus this year on family and student well-being. And so reporters did come and interview and get some really, I think, some really a good positive story about how, you know, West Milwaukee is trying to meet the needs of kids in this way, but also it's, you know, work school districts all over the country are taking on. But it's good for us to get some positive news for the work we're doing. And even, you know, what we just saw here, I was like, oh, this should be in the news. That was powerful. Adam and I and Deidre are starting our school improvement plan, school visits. That'll start tomorrow morning. We have our first 2 schools, so that's really checking in with how schools are, you know, organizing strategies to really move towards the goals that we set in the strategic plan that we've now set reading and math goals for every single school. And then our visits are also, do they have any unique goals that at each school they're pursuing to make sure we understand and have the information we need to support their work if they have set some unique goals, which they can do. And then we're also asking them about what are the key strategies you're using and how do you know if they're going to be successful, so what evidence are you going to be looking for. And then we'll do some classroom visits if there are examples of their key strategies in practice, right, so that we really have a really good tight alignment. So I'm looking forward to those visits. And then just an update on our Director of Finance and Operations position. We conducted some interviews today. And so we had a team from the district, and we're still not finding the individual that we think is the best fit. So we're going to continue to work on that. It's a position that there are very few people out there right now that are in that world that have the credential. But we'll continue to move forward with research and with conversations about what other options there may be that make sure we stay on track. Because we've made such good gains that we want to make sure that we maintain and keep moving on, and we're in a good place, I think, to be successful with that. So that's my update, and that completes the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Questions or comments for the superintendent? Seeing none, we'll move on to the board president's report. It'd just be the calendar update for me this evening. As you're well aware of, prior to this meeting tonight, we had our tax levy workshop, and following this meeting, we will have a closed session. On Monday, November 13th, we will have our regular Board of Education meeting, and right now we do not have a workshop scheduled after that. Monday, November 20th, we do have a workshop, learning and technology workshop, and a guaranteed and viable curriculum. On Monday, November 27th, we have a regular Board of Education meeting, followed by our learning and technology workshop on school report cards. A reminder that all our meetings start at 6 o'clock. The regularly scheduled meetings are televised and open to the public. The workshops are open to the public, but they are not televised. I have nothing from my community groups. Anybody have anything to share, Heather?
Saturday, November 4th is Hale's Craft Fair from 9 to 3. I think admission is $3, and I know they are sold out. I think she said 175 vendors. Tomorrow is Dodke's open house at 5:30. West Dallas Central is selling raffle tickets, $10 a piece. There's a 2-month every Friday drawing, and that is for all the sports. So see one of our athletes for a ticket.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would like to say our 7th grade junior Huskies football program is 7-0 this year. And they are going against the Milwaukee Generals, who are also 7-0. Saturday, 6 p.m. at West Dallas Athletic Complex. So come out and cheer them on.
I thought I saw a hand up. Sue, is your hand up?
Yes. The West Dallas Lions Club, Sunday, November 5th, is having their chili cook-off at the Knights of Columbus on 92nd Street. It's from noon to 3 o'clock, and that's a good community activity. I do want to thank all of the students and teachers and participants of the CAD and the Coalition Halloween party that was held last Saturday. It was a great success, and we thank our community police department and our students for making that a successful thing. And then I attended, I think you did also, the Nathan Hale School Music had presented The Leaves Are Falling. It was just fantastic. You know, music is alive and well in West Allis. We've been famous for our music. I was sorry that I couldn't get to Central's event. That was also.
It was very good, yes, yes.
But, you know, and I'll make sure to get to Central's the next time. But, you know, I do send out a notice to our women's club to let them know when our concerts are, because they're wonderful. So if you see them, make sure you go and attend one.
Heather?
I'll just say on top of that, if you get a chance to see those, if they're on public access, I would watch them. Central had a piece that was by the orchestra that I had chills because it was scary and there was screaming and stuff, but Hales had their marching band march in, and that was just fantastic.
Yes, it was.
It was fantastic.
Super.
You're not going to sleep through any of the band.
Okay, we'll move on.
I'm sorry, I had one more thing.
I'm sorry.
I didn't want to cut off anyone. So I just wanted to give some kudos to one of our teachers, David Sherman. I believe he's the middle teacher at Hale. I had been contacted by a community member who had a project that they needed done, and so with Deidre and Gwen's help, was able to get him connected with David Sherman, and he was able to help out the community member, basically get manufactured what he needed for a project that he had, and really went above and beyond his duties as a teacher here in the district. So I just want to make sure that he's given the recognition that he deserves for doing that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to number 9, the consent agenda. 9.1, the approval of minutes of the October 9th regular board meeting and the October 16th board work session, and 9.3, the financial summary.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or comments on that? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Right now, I'd like to pass the chair to our vice president because I'm going to recuse myself from the next one because I have a family member that is on that supplemental contract list.
Sure, okay. So item number 9.2 is the employment summary and supplementary contracts. Any comments or discussion?
I just have a question. I like to kind of compare this year's versus last year's, and I did notice that the supplemental contracts for the musical at Central were seriously, drastically cut. The musical director was cut by $250, assistant director by $250, the chorus director was cut by $1,000, and the orchestra was cut by $200. And I'm not sure why that's such a significant cut, but I just wanted to voice my concerns that there was such drastic cuts to those.
Yeah, and you want to chime in, but those are school-based supplementary contracts, and so the schools have autonomy and decision-making about how they distribute them. There's not a scale that gets used, so if they wanted to create additional supplementary contracts for other areas, they may lower some things, they may raise some things, but those are school-based decisions.
Yeah, and Central did add a couple of new supplementary contracts this year, and so it's just they have one pot of money and they divide it in different ways depending on what they're doing in the buildings. We realized with new principals this year what a daunting task that was to decide which supplementary contracts they are doing and which ones should they have and which ones did they have last year that they should keep going, and how do you decide on amounts and things like that. So we started to put together a bunch of documents of this is what we did last year versus this is what we did this year, so that the principals can all sit down and look at those and know what people are doing in different buildings and maybe provide just a little bit more clarity from one building to the next around how that money is used.
Is that communicated prior to some of these responsibilities or activities being taken on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, when they take them on, they know exactly how much money that contract is going to be for, and then individuals choose to take it or not take it. And so, in some...
I thought I had heard of some situations where people might have started putting work in and then found out what the contract amount was after the fact. So that's why I was asking.
Okay. That
for
isn't typically how it's done, so that would surprise me that that's how they did it, because usually they're put forward as a certain amount of money, and then the person decides whether or not they want to pursue it or take it based on that.
Well, I'm kind of wondering with the music department, though, who starts very, very early, long before school, was there the thought that they were getting money from last year and changing? So just, it might be something to look into to make sure that there weren't feelings hurt or promises broken, to make sure that people are compensated fairly.
Okay.
I guess I'm recognizing myself. To go back to your point then, Deidre, will there be some sort of you know, I'm assuming the pots of money then are equal, like at the high school level, and they're equal at the intermediate school level, maybe, or is it proportionate based on size?
Yeah.
So then from there, maybe there's some guidelines that, you know, this type of role is approximately in a range, and this type of role is approximately in a range, so that there's, again, going back to the equity piece that we were
Right.
talking about earlier?
Yeah, our goal wouldn't be to direct that. Our goal would really be to connect them, to have
Sure.
those conversations
Have
in and
guidelines.
amongst themselves, and maybe make some guidelines between the 2 high school principals, the 3 high school principals with DACI included, which is a little less around supplementary contracts, but to include the 3 of them, the 3 intermediate principals, and then the 4 intermediate principals, and the 11 elementary principals, so that they can have some conversation in and amongst ourselves. Because really, those should be dependent on, there's certain supplemental contracts that one building may have, and that's just not a need in another building, or that's covered through something else in another building, but at minimum, so that they get that time to talk to each other. That's what we're hoping. Mike Weaver and I are working on that to facilitate that.
Dan?
Oh, thank you. I'm just curious, because I'm gonna plead stupidity on this one. I'm just wondering how many young men and young women are involved in the diving operation, the co-op with Central and Hale? Does anyone know? I mean, is it,
They
I don't know,
have
what
their
is it,
meetings
12,
tonight,
14,
and they have
18?
meetings Wednesday, so sign-up night is tonight and at Central and Wednesday at Hale, so they won't know until then.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And then again, going back to that, the athletic supplementary contracts are a different pool of money than, say, your Spanish club and honor society and things like that?
That's a good question for Andy. Are the athletic supplementals and the regular supplementals separated in the contract? In the
athletic gets their own separate grouping, and then the buildings are budgeted separately.
And again, that's at principal discretion with, like, in this case, cooperation from the ADs to kind of discuss how that is allocated?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right.
Just so you know, I'm the other person that's abstaining from this vote.
So we'll have 7 people voting on this. Any other questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that passes.
I'd like to abstain.
Okay, then I think we have to recall, because I think we just voted prior to.
Yep, I'm
Anybody
sorry.
abstaining? Okay.
I'm thinking
So do we have
I would like to
to
abstain.
recant the vote?
Let me vote again.
Okay, so we're going to have 3 members of the board abstain from vote, and we'll have 6 members vote. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So nay.
Nay.
All right, on to action items.
So it's back to you,
I give the
Jeff.
gavel back to Jeff.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. We'll move on to action items 10.2, the Learning Center High School name change from James E. Dodke High School. Deidre and Mr. Gals.
So this really came from Greg and Jason at Dotke, as they've worked to really build that sense of community around Dotke and give it some definition as its own entity and a place where their family kind of exists, as they call themselves at Dotke, and is evident in the practice that you see when you're over there. The name The Learning Center has been a bit confusing to the community as a definition on what they're doing at Dotke. So I'll pass it over to Greg to kind of give a little bit more background on that, and then we'll answer any questions you guys may have.
Sure, thank you, Deidre. I think the confusion, I can go back a little bit historically. I think I've been there now 5 years, and when I started there, it was West Southwest Milwaukee Learning Center, and I worked at Central before that, so I know a little bit about why that name change occurred, and I'll go over that very briefly with you, and then kind of explain why it just makes sense that we just refer to ourselves as Dotke. But back then, the district was paying for seats outside of our district to assist some of our students that were behind in credits for credit recovery. So when the Learning Center came into play, the district decided not to be contracting out and paying for those seats, but to combine all of those into, you know, a one-stop shop for our students. So basically, instead of just having Dotke High School, we were having multiple different programs that fell with Dotke High School. So the Learning Center was really just an umbrella term. So from what I recall, the district decided to change it to a Learning Center because of all the other programs that fell under it, Dotke being one of them. So although Dotke's never left, it's always been there, we've kind of meshed all of the programs into Dotke High School, And so it just makes sense kind of that we return to naming it that. We're in the new building, we're into branding our schools, it makes sense for our community. Datkey's been around 34 years, so it just kind of makes sense and is good timing in my mind that we just return to being called Datkey High School.
And in order to change it with DPI, to officially have it be called on the school report card and in all school records, Datkey High School, as opposed to the West Allis West Milwaukee Learning Center, that requires board action. So that's why we're here tonight.
Would it still be James E. Datkey, or would it just be Datkey?
It would, thank you for asking that. It would be James E. Datkey High School, just as it always has been.
Okay.
So,
Will it be still an alternative school, or is it going to be a high school?
it would be an alternative high school.
I mean, an alternative.
So we're a high school, Deidre mentioned earlier, one of the 3 high schools in our district. So we are a high school, we have been. It would just be an alternative high school where we teach kids in a different way.
But we don't want alternative in the name, as that creates an identification that, right, is
Thank you.
not what we're looking to do.
I'd say we do
Right.
things alternatively there, we do
Yes.
things differently there, but we don't want to label kids as,
Yes.
being different or negative in some way.
Will you, when the students graduate, are they going to graduate from Datkey, or are they going to graduate from Hale or Central?
Our proposal for tonight is a name change, nothing else would change, so they would still get their diploma from their home high school.
And then they have the ability to participate in graduation ceremonies at Datkey, at their home high school, or at both, which we did have about 5 last year who I
Yeah.
think participated in both.
Good.
Any other questions? Pat?
Yes. The person that we have the name, the high school for, have you contacted the family that they are supportive of the measure? I'm assuming that's the reason why it got Datkey in the first place, but I would hate to overlook that as we do the naming rights once again.
I can say we've reached out to the family for inviting for activities and Thanksgiving meals and, things that when we do celebrations, we do. Again, I guess in my mind, it's not something that we change the name away from. It's always been there. So this time I can say I didn't reach out specifically to say we want to change it back, because again, in our minds, it's always been Datkey High School.
Purpose of the school.
Yeah, right.
Just how we'd like to identify that.
Anyone else? Okay, we're looking for a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Second.
Any final last-minute discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We will move on to, that passes.
Thank you. I remember our community open house tomorrow, 5:30, if anyone's interested. We had the one for students and parents already, but tomorrow's community, so we're looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to action item 10.3, the board policy number 421, entrance age. This is a second reading.
So there weren't any suggestions for changes after the first reading, so it's coming back as is for a second reading.
Questions? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Last chance for discussion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. Move on to 10.4, board policy number 433, the assignment of students to classes/teachers, second reading.
Yet again, this was another one who came forward for a first reading, and we didn't have any suggestions for change, so it's coming forward for a second reading as is.
Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We will move on to 10.5, board policy 443.8, care of school/personal property by students.
So ditto on this one. We did the first reading. We didn't have any suggestions or changes, so now it's coming forward for a second read.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Can I just skip the discussion part? I will ask for it though, the discussion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. That passes. We will move on to 10.6, the long-term capital improvement plan. Mr. Cromie.
So what's being presented tonight is a 10-year capital improvement plan. It only has 2 items on it. Again, those items, as discussed in the workshop, were replacement of the turf football field at the West Allis Athletic Complex, replacement of the soccer field at the West Dallas Athletic Complex. The purpose really of approving this capital improvement plan is part of the process in establishing Fund 46, which is the next item on the agenda. Like any capital improvement plan, it is a living document. The discussion that came out of Business Services was, we know we have about 5 years of life left on the football field, and we know we have about 8 years of life left on the soccer field. The fact that those cost about $1 million to replace, we needed to take a look at a place to start thinking about what's it going to take when those are up and trying to fund it. I would anticipate this being at some point added to the 5-year capital improvement plan that we run as kind of a subsection, being the longer planning process. But again, it's a living document, so approving this today, it just allows us to get Fund 46 started so we can start adding money to that and start the 5-year clock on the dollars for it. It's certainly not set in stone that those dollars, even though we would transfer them this year in the budget, would have to be used specifically on the soccer field and the football field. Tomorrow we could decide to approve another plan that says, no, we want to change that to the roof at wherever and use those funds for the roof in 5 years. So just looking to approve this, again, to help us get Fund 46 established and get the ball rolling on the 5-year clock.
Questions? Noah?
Just for clarification purposes, I understand this is the point, is to get the fund to exist. And what we use the money for would be determined at a distant time in the future of 5 years minimum. It could be longer than 5 years if we choose not to use the money. And it would be a different board action to decide what the money would be used for, or would that be a plan that is brought forth by?
If it gets rolled into the 5-year CIP, just approving the 5-year CIP. If you keep it as a separate CIP, you'd have to approve a separate CIP change to it.
Okay.
But again, it has 5 years from today to even be considered to spend the money.
Okay, right, and if we do nothing, it doesn't mean we have to spend it on replacing the turf fields.
Correct. Yep.
Right. That's all I have.
Any other questions? Sue?
Does this limit what you can spend it on? If something comes up, it's after 5 years. I understand you can't spend 5 cents of this until 5 years. But if something comes up, a boiler, I don't know what can come up, would you just be able to put it on the list and then take the money out and put it on?
Yeah, so if we think about the Longfellow, the siding, the brick siding incident, we could certainly make that adjustment and pay for that.
I'm concerned only because I'm concerned that it's limiting. But you're saying it's not limiting, it's only
Well, it's limiting to
limited
capital projects. And
Right.
once the money is moved to Fund 46, it cannot come back to Fund 10. So once the transfer is made, it's not a fluid movement. It has to be used for capital projects, but those are going to exist for us in perpetuity with the amount of facilities we have, so.
I don't think we'll run out.
Well, right, well, it does, I guess, have some limiting factor in that it can never come back to Fund 10. We're never going to fund it so much that we're going to outpace the need for 20-some facilities in the district.
But once you put money in, it's there, it's.
Correct.
What you just said, you can't pull it out.
It's there, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. How popular right now are the two, the football field at Hale and the central soccer field? How popular is that a movement as far as in the district right now, as far as people or what you've heard? That's one of the first things that need to get done, or has to get done.
It's not necessarily on the list of the most popular things, but they only have a shelf life of about 10 years. Where at that point, safety becomes an issue, its ability to just hold up under normal usage becomes an issue. So unlike a gym floor, which probably lasts 40 years or so, these have a shelf life of about 10, where then safety becomes a concern.
The other thing, and I might be wrong with this, but I remember when we went through this with one of the NFL teams donating so much to the project at Hale, we were also told that there were pieces of equipment that went along with this, and then we found out afterwards, later on, that those pieces of equipment did not work on that field. So obviously, those pieces of equipment are probably just rusting out, or are we using them? And if they, I mean, how are we going to use them in the future?
To be honest with you, I have no idea the pieces that you're referencing, but I know about a year ago, we talked at the board about getting it on Steve Rohde's radar, which he has, and it usually requires a yearly upkeep where they do some leveling underneath and they make sure the pellet infill is all taken care of. And so we've gotten that on a routine maintenance. And certainly, like anything, not doing it routinely shortens the lifespan. That's like changing oil in your car. If you don't do that, eventually it's just going to be a really bad idea for you. So we have gotten that up. The machines, I'm not sure if, I mean, Steve is right there, but if we contract that out or if we do it ourselves with some guidance, I don't know, but we're trying to prolong the life as much as possible.
Thank you.
Stephanie?
So the idea behind the fund, though, is just to prepare for routine, big projects that we know are coming, so we don't have to unexpectedly plan for them when we know that they're coming anyway, whatever it is, whether it's a boiler or a roof or a parking lot, or we need to put a new stadium somewhere or new bleachers because they're falling apart or what have you. We know these projects are coming, so now we're basically starting a savings account for these big major projects that we know are going to happen at some point in the future.
Right. Yep. I would look at it for two things. One, what are those big things that have some routines to them? Roofing is one. The fields are another. But bleachers is another prime example. So while our bleachers might last 50 years, we know that they're going to cost X amount of dollars. So if we start saving now, when the expense comes, we already have all the money saved for them ready to go. It's not something that we just have to find in the budget. Say, oh, geez, we need to find $1 million this year to replace X. We have it here. We've set aside for it. We've budgeted for it. And if we budget for it on a yearly basis or some value of dollars on a yearly basis, it just makes those things a whole lot easier to accomplish rather than worry about should we cut those to do something or just even worrying about it.
Basically trying to be proactive.
Yeah, like a utility payment. You know, we have it every year, so if we just start funding it every year, we'll be in a better shape when we need to replace those larger ticket items.
But isn't that what fund balance is for? Is a rainy day, or, you know, that's what...
Well, yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. Fund balance is for a rainy day fund, but I wouldn't say roof replacements and field replacements are rainy days because we know those things have to get replaced. The rainy day is the side of Longfellow falls off, and we need $100,000 to fix that.
Or a retaining wall.
Or a retaining wall in the back of Central that costs $250,000.
And isn't there a plus to moving this money from our fund balance to this account, because then it's looked at as an expense?
It's looked at as an expense in the year of the transfer. So this year, I've earmarked $325,000 in the budget based on those two things. DPI will consider that an expense this year, so when it's calculating our state aid for next year, we'll calculate $325,000 of expense in this year. We'll spend it 5 years from now, 8 years from now, 10 years from now. It doesn't count it at that point in time because it's already expense. So then we just continue running our normal operating budget without fear of the repercussions of saving now or a much larger expense later.
Dan?
Thank you. So going back to the fields, we don't necessarily have to look at artificial turf. We could look at other means like grass stadium, correct?
Well, we could replace them, but I would tell you that the vast majority of the area has gone to turf fields, and they've gone to turf fields for a reason, because the upkeep is cheaper on a yearly basis. While I don't have any safety records on it, my guess is that this school board looked into the safety records, and the school boards of area school districts have also looked into it. But really, once you're going turf, it's kind of like when you decide to put iPads in the classroom. Once you do that, that's something that you have to figure out how to incorporate at some level. It's not so you can't just go totally back to textbooks and say this is just how we're going to learn.
Okay. Well, on that note, is it possible not to use the same company that the district used in the past for that turf?
Oh, those would be bid out. That is such a large project that would go.
I understand it would be bid out, but do we have to send a bid to that particular company?
We certainly don't have to,
because they certainly did not help us in regards to that turf.
Yeah, no, we certainly don't have to, but it is a project that would have to be bid out.
That's correct, but remember there's the proposed legislation that would require contracting to the lowest bidder. And if that is the lowest bidder, and that legislation is passed, we would be required to use the previous contractor.
Well, that puts a whole different scope on it then, because if we were to go to the lowest bidder, and they possibly could be the lowest bidder, how are we going to make sure that the same situation doesn't happen again that happened before? I'm not saying I'm against it.
Well, they're contractually bound, so we'd have to pursue legal avenues should.
Which would be a cost to us.
Break the contract.
Okay.
But again, you pursue those legal damages I guess it depends on to what level it is, but at some point you pursue legal damages.
Last week at the WASB Regional Workshop there, they talked about budget issues, and that was one of them. And WASB said they are going to be pushing back on that because they want you to be able to deal with reputable firms and maybe local firms if a board so chooses, rather than having to take company XYZ from Alabama, or not that there's anything wrong with those states, but they're not local.
Right.
And
The
your local
schools are,
dollars they'd like to see spent local.
Right.
So they talked about pushback on
The School
that.
Administrators Alliance is also fighting back against that. Really using a school board or superintendent discretion should, bids be comparable, that you can work with somebody who's reputable or local or someone that you've had success with in the past.
Yeah, because I just want to make it clear, I'm not against turf, artificial turf for any reason. You can 50% here and 50% there, grass and turf. It's the maintenance and how it's laid and how the drainage system works out. And I just want to make sure that if we go ahead and put this into a savings account and we go out there and put out for bids, that all of a sudden this company comes back and it's the lowest bid, does that give us, I know you said the superintendent, but does that give us the board a chance to take a look at it and say, we've had problems in the past, how can you accommodate us with those problems?
If that law is not put into place, it certainly gives us the leverage to say,
Okay.
Yep, that was the lowest bid, we've had a poor experience with them, we're going with the next company.
Thank you.
Susan?
This is a quick question. Does the funds from Act 32 that was just passed, does that influence this at all?
It does not. We could pull projects out of that, say lighting, and decide that we want to do lighting in 10 years and start saving for it now. But no, that's a totally separate project than Fund 46.
So we can't put any of that money into Fund 46?
Correct, because those projects will all be done within the next 12 to 15 months, so we would not be able to pay for those
All right.
again for 60 months from now.
No?
If we exceed our shelf life on the turf and we start experiencing some excessive injuries, are we liable? Is there, as far as...
Yeah, if we know that there's an issue with it, so, presumably we get it updated every year and they find some sort of tear in there that we haphazardly repair and someone gets injured on it, certainly we know because we know behind it. Should that same tear exist, but nobody has any knowledge of it, and also there's just an injury on a football field, we wouldn't hold any liability in that because no one knew. Now, immediately after that, we have it, knowledge of it, and we need to get it repaired and follow through on that. But educators' liability really hinders on, is anybody aware of it? And if no one's aware of the issue, then educators' liability is really small. And we don't hold a whole lot. But as soon as someone knows about it, then we're in for the whole thing.
I don't know if I should say to Andy or Jeff.
Yeah, that's all right. Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to make note that I know in the past that some of the board members that are currently here, as well as myself, have known, because it's been stated to us that there have been tears on that field and that there have been fairly large tears on that field. So that is something that's occurring, okay?
Everything that I've known about, we've had repaired, including when we changed the logo out on it, to get repaired. So if something comes to our attention, it's right on to Steve's, and we get that taken care of right away.
Okay.
If it's, again, not brought to my attention, then
okay.
I can't do anything about that.
Fix what you don't know about.
Right.
I just want to address one of the key reasons why this is necessary. Going back 10-plus years, the stadium field really needed renovation. It's longer than that. I think it's like 15. And there just wasn't money in the budget. You look at capital improvements, at that time, we were passing budgets that were $1 to $1.5 million. Now we're looking at budgets that we passed that are up to $3 million. So when you have an expenditure as large as the stadium to renovate, and as a very important part of your high school activity, and now for both schools, not just Hale, but for Central too, you want to assure yourself, and for the benefit of the conferences that you're playing for, that your field is going to be up and running and competitive with everybody else's fields, and it's also revenue generating. So this is one of those ways to protect it, so that, as we heard in Facilities Committee when we had it running a short while back and disbanded, why are we not as a district saving for some of our more big ticket items? And this is one of these things. So this way it guarantees that when the time comes that that stadium needs its proper renovation, and typically you look at capital improvements to spread across 17 buildings, and all of a sudden you see $1 million expenditure there. How come that field, that one single field, gets all that money and it shortens the life of the other buildings that need the repair? So that's really the reason for doing this, so that it doesn't put it in a jeopardy situation, that it comes about timely, and it's saved for.
Dan?
Oh, I positively agree with you, Pat. But I also have to say that in the past, I'm not so sure, even before Andy's time, or even, excuse me, before our interim superintendent's time, I'm not so sure the figures that we were given were all the correct figures. So, again, I'm not against putting in that new field because of the fact that it's needed. I think it's overdue. That field's been worked. It's worked out. I mean, I've seen it. So I don't have a problem with that, but I just want to make sure, like when Noah was talking about a savings account, I think that's the best way to look at this. It's a savings account, which I'm for, because things can come up, and I know they can, and, you know, it's like having an insurance policy on some of your things for your home, your furnace, your air conditioner. You can buy an insurance policy. So this is what this is an insurance policy. So I don't have a problem with it. So thank you.
Anyone else? And we'd be looking for a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
Last minute discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. We will move on to 10.7, a resolution establishing a long-term capital improvement trust fund for the school district of West Allis, West Milwaukee.
So in order to establish Fund 46, we need the board to approve the resolution allowing us to establish Fund 46. It really has three requirements. One, that we approve, at minimum, a 10-year capital improvement plan. That was just on the previous vote. We have to approve a Fund 46 at the board level, and then should that be approved, then I have to open up a separate account labeled Fund 46 with our banking institution, which I would do starting tomorrow. We would transfer, at this time, $325,000, which is earmarked in the budget for that transfer. Those three things get sent to the state, and then we have Fund 46 based on today's starting date, as that resolution would be passed today. And that would start the 5-year clock ticking on that Fund 46.
So,
When I was reading your information, it says that the board actions required by June 30th of the fiscal year.
In order to establish, or in order to be able to transfer the funds, we have to have it established prior to June 30th of 2018 for us to transfer funds in the 17-18 school year. Yep, that's just the legal jargon from Quarles and Brady, the official resolution language.
No?
Yep.
Language in here about the amount of money transferred each year. Is this something that is binding as a resolution, meaning that it's going to automatically happen?
Nope.
Okay.
It is something that we would budget for should the funds be available.
Okay.
Any other questions? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Last minute comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes. We'll move on to 10.8, 2017-18 final budget and tax levy adoption.
So we discussed this in workshop quite a bit, and we had talked about that property taxes and state aid work as a teeter-totter, and as one goes up, the other goes down. So in this case, with state aid going down, our tax levy is set to go up so that it stays within the revenue limit. I do want to clarify one point that Sue asked, and I did some research. Sue, you had asked if we under-levy this year, can we get that back? And the state does have a caveat on it that I verified, I was not aware, but I verified. If your non-recurring exemptions total more than what you under levy, then you cannot, which this case they do because we have some non-recurring exemptions. One, we have the hold harmless. That's about $1.5 million. And we also received that $800,000 or $850,000 for open enrollment, so that totals $2.3 million, and because we would under levy by $2 million based on the workshop, we would not be able to get that back in any subsequent years. If we were a district that was growing in population, we wouldn't have that hold harmless, which again is just based on our declining enrollment. So I wanted to clarify that because I was mistaken and did misspeak earlier, as I thought we would be able to generate that back regardless of that.
So,
No.
so that means if we decide to do what we had talked about in the workshop, we are basically hamstringing ourselves moving forward by that percentage.
I guess, yes, you wouldn't be able to get that back because those exemptions exceed the $2 million. But I think at $2 million, we're still looking at a $2.5 million fund balance increase minus anything that we chose to do with those funds. Next year, we're looking at another $1.7 million coming in categorical aid. Essentially, our revenue limit will stay pretty close. Now, again, our enrollment will drop again a third year, so we'll see some decrease in that, but we're still going to have a pretty sizable difference between revenues and expenses. At the same point in time, we're ending this year at $9.9 million fund balance, and we're looking at, say, the 2.5, if we stick with the $2 million reduction, plus the net sale of this building of about 6.3 puts us at $8.8 million on top of 9.9 for $18.7 million. Presumably the reduction of at least $700,000 in short-term borrowing interest that we would be adding back. So $700,000 of interest money back at minimum. We might be able to get rid of the whole thing, but I'll just use the worst-case scenario. We'd get $700,000 in short-term borrowing interest back, 1.7 additional revenue and new categorical aid for $2.4 million, which still exceeds the potential $2 million reduction this year.
But would it be forever? Like that reduction is forever? Or does that
We
mean?
wouldn't get that $2 million back, correct.
We can still tax to the max every other year after that.
Correct, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
You're sure about that?
Yes. That I'm positive about. Can always
You
tax to
can't
the
make up
max.
the lost income that we wouldn't be getting for taxing the max in this fiscal year.
In this one, it's a
calendar year.
one-time shot at this. It works very similar to how we talked about earlier, how state aid is impacted based on 16, 17 revenues to expenses. This, not taxing to the max this year, only affects this year. Wouldn't affect our ability to tax to the max next year, regardless of what our exemptions are. We will certainly have some hold harmless, because again, we'll have one more year. We should have another year of declining enrollment. Presumably, we've cleaned up as much of the open enrollment as possible. Now, that's not to say we might not have some kids here and there just who switch from the tuition waiver, but Jeff has done a fantastic job of cleaning that up. So to have such a drastic swing again, I cannot foresee that happening as we've gone through that list. So it's a one-year shot on the $2 million.
Right, so it's not something that's going to continue forward, that now we've been reduced to this amount because we never, we didn't max out this year, so now, we're
Correct.
reduced to that
So
amount because of
our
the-
revenue limit this year, with all of the exemptions, is $90,067,253. Next year, when they calculate our revenue limit, they're going to start with that $90,067,253. That's about $4 million over where we are right now. If we would decide to under levy by $2 million, they're going to start with $88,067,253, which again is already about $2.1 million over where we are now, is the starting point for the revenue limit. All the exemptions still get piled on top of that, so presumably our revenue limit's probably going to be somewhere around $90 million again next year, right where we are today.
Okay, but then subtracting out the revenue that we're generating because of the sale of the
Right,
building.
yeah, state
and
aid would presumably, we'd be in a very similar situation to where we are today. Not as drastic, but in kind of the same situation.
I just don't want to hamstring the district moving forward. I understand we're talking about this year, but, In the past, some things have been short-sighted, and I want to make sure that we're looking at the long term of this, when we're making these sorts of decisions, so that everyone understands the repercussions of those things, so.
So what's our pleasure?
Yeah, if we tax to the max, we'll have a tax levy of $48,864,003 for a mill rate of $11.46. Remember, about every $1 million is about 23.5 cents off of that mill rate. In the workshop, we had discussed reduction of $2 million for a mill rate of $10.99.
Do you need a motion for?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I move to reduce the mill rate by $2 million.
Second.
So by doing that, really, our proposal is a tax levy in the amount of $46,864,003. Apportioned out as general fund of $43,484,078. Debt service of $379,925. And community services of $3 million.
And that puts our mill rate at $10.99.
$10.99 per $1,000 of assessed property value.
I apologize. After you made the motion, was there a second?
I did.
Okay. Any last minute comments or concerns or questions? Bill, Pat, because you weren't here for the.
No,
or you were
I'm
gonna
sorry,
come,
I
so you-
could not be here.
Right, I just
work
wanted to
obligation.
know if you had any questions.
I don't.
on
I
it.
understand what you're doing.
Okay, let's have a roll call vote on this, please, Suzette.
Okay. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Abstain.
Ms. Emmons?
Yes.
Ms. Curran?
Yes.
Mrs. Justin?
Yes.
Mr. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Ustra?
Yes.
Mrs. Sujacki?
Yes.
President Sikich?
Yes. Okay, thank you, Andy, for all your work.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
We didn't have any last week, but I'll ask you, any new ideas for agenda items, agenda items or workshops that you want? Then we would look to take a 5-minute recess while Brian takes down the cameras. And then I would also ask that the room be cleared so that we can go into closed session. We are at recess.